Hi, we're going to finish off our respawning today. I've been wanting to work on spawn timers for a while, but we needed to get enough functionality in order to be able to see this. This should be, like I said, a much shorter video because we have almost all the work done. What we're going to see today is the ability to kill off individual mobs like I'm doing right here, which we've already seen. What we're going to be able to see are mobs respawn. They come back into the scene. This camp is set up on a 10-second respawn timer, which means that if I kill off a mob, we should get another respawn within the camp in 10 seconds. That could be at any of the spawn points, and it will be picking any of the mob types under distribution. Now there's another orc camp over here that we haven't really looked at before. And this is Orc 2. This Orc camp here has mobs that respawn in 20 seconds. I wanted to make a noticeable difference in the respawn time, so it was clear that the times are not hard-coded. These are a function of the spawn group. We'll wait for these to respawn. Now they're coming in. Okay, so that's the functionality we have. So let's go back into Unity and look at how this was done. One little bit of cleanup that I just did off camera was I took the target ring and I moved it to 1000, 1000, 1000, so I didn't have it here cluttering up the scene. It will warp to whatever target is selected once the game starts. So its position isn't important, but I need to have the target ring enabled or we wouldn't see it when we went looking for it. Okay, back onto the respawning. Recall the plan was that when a mob died, we would start a respawn timer for that mob. And the timer would be something that would be a property of the spawn group. Okay, we could have made it a property of the NPC, so that each NPC type had a different spawn time. That's probably a little bit too much. If we really do need to have unique respawn time for an NPC, put them in their own spawn group. So it'll be okay to set up the spawn group as a particular respawn time. So, for example, in the demo, I had Orc 1 setting at respawning at 10 seconds, Orc 2 at 20 seconds. Now, in a real game, our respawn times were probably around 5 minutes. It takes a while to kill a mob and to recover from the battle. So, 5 minutes wasn't that bad of a problem. What we don't want to have is a respawn time so fast that if you start killing these mobs, they would be respawning before you finish the camp. Because if you're actually trying to get through an area, by fighting your way through an area, we'd never make any progress if they kept respawning it fast. Now, how to go about doing this? One approach that I considered was using coroutines. That's traditionally the way delays are implemented within Unity. And a coroutine is not a parallel program. It does not run in parallel, as much as it sounds like it does. It's ran inline as part of the frame, meaning that it's really just like update in the update loop. So once a frame, the coroutines are ran, and then the update loop will be ran. So it's just a way to get stuff out of your update loop. Now the coroutine is a little bit more than that, though, because it has the ability to progress a little ways into a task and then resume it on the next call. So that's why the coroutines use an iterator as their return value. And so we would just come in each frame and we would keep yielding the CPU to the next coroutine until our timer expired. Anyhow, I considered that. But the objects that we're using here are not mono-behaviors, so we can't use coroutines. And I don't want to make them mono-behaviors just to use a coroutine. One of the problems with the coroutines, though, is that if the player leaves the zone, and the zone unloads, our coroutines would all stop. So respawn timers would be lost. If we were on a particularly long respawn, one could leave the zone back in, and defeat the respawn. Okay, so if we had rare mob that only spawn once an hour, you know, we could just reset that timer by zoning. So it'd be nice to have the timers persist. We also will need multiple timers. It's likely that multiple mobs will be dead at any time. So traditionally, what one does when they need a bunch of timers is to create virtual timers. That is, we have one real timer, and then we keep a sorted list of times, and we just check that. Every time the real timer ticks, we see if one of our virtual timers has expired. Now, because we keep a sorted list, all we have to do is really check the first entry in the list. And, you know, and then once it goes and expires, we would just keep checking the next entries until we found one that was in the future, and then we would, you know, exit the timer thing and wait for a future call. So that's how we'll do that. It'll be clear enough when we get into the code. So it suits our purpose then to keep a list of times and the corresponding spawn group IDs, because we're going to be wanting to respawn a spawn group at that time. Now, I'm avoiding storing references to like a spawn group. It seems reasonable to cache the spawn group reference, but again, if we unloaded zone and came back in, we may have different data structures. So I'm not going to risk that there. I mean, I guess I don't. I guess they do persist. Still, a spawn group ID is a safe thing. Now, the NPC manager is persistent across zone changes, and it was intended to manage these type of things. So we're going to store the times inside the NPC manager. The zone manager is a mono-behavior, and so it can do a lot of this other stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to have the zone manager really drive the timer. It's going to call the NPC manager, but I don't want to call it every frame. That's a overkill there. It's enough for me to call the zone manager once a second. So once a second, we'll ping the zone manager, the NPC manager, and let it check its timers. So our resolution on respawn time will be 1 second, as opposed to the if we were using the update loop, when it would be maybe 100th of a second. Okay. So zone manager is created for each of the zones, and it's a game object in the scene. And when the zone starts, the zone manager registers itself with the NPC manager. It tells the manager start zone end for whatever the end is. And the NPC manager, this persistent thing that sits out there, will then go and spawn all the mobs for that zone. Okay, so the NPC manager would at that point, once the zone starts up, add itself as a listener for the zone manager. So if we change zones, the NPC manager would automatically register itself with the new zone manager. Okay, so I think we have that taken care of. I think I've talked about the NPC manager and how the virtual timers are going to be checked. Now, the nice thing about this system here is that we can have an unlimited, really, number of timers running at the same time. Now, keeping a sorted list, I mean, insert is a bit expensive because the list needs to be sorted. So there's nlogn insertion time, since it essentially is a sort every time. We could have used a dictionary, a sorted dictionary, and got login, but this list isn't going to be that long. Okay? I don't think we're going to be having 10,000 mobs on that respawn timer running there. So I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of performance just to get a convenient implementation. Okay, so let's take a look then at the code and where we're going to be putting all this stuff. Okay, let's see what we're going to do. The first thing is let's add a sorted list to the NPC manager, since I said that this was going to be so there's a sorted list. I'm going to make it a generic type. It's going to map timestamp when the timer expires to the spawn group ID. So timestamp will be system.datetime system datetime is the type, and map that to an integer. Timers equals null. Of course, I don't want to forget to create the list down here. That's a equals new sorted list system dot date time to an integer. Right, so we have the list created here. And I think we should go add the timer logic into Zone Manager right now. So here's our Zone Manager. I'm going to want to have a function down here that I will be called once a second. Call it timer tick. And then we'll do something here. And the way we're going to call this is using invoke repeating. Invoke repeating invokes the method name in time seconds, then repeatedly every repeat rate seconds. So I want this once a second. And we pass the name of this function in here, timer tick. And the times and repeat times are floats. So 1F, 1F. Alright, so that should call our timer tick, which does nothing right now. Let's go back to, well, I'll just put the call into NPC Manager here, even though I haven't written the function yet. Okay, NPC Manager dot instance dot, and I'll call it timer tick. Set that up here, and then I'll come back over to NPC Manager. And I'll put that down here someplace around where all the spawning is, because we're going to be working with this code in a bit. So public void timer tick. And how are we going to tell if the timer has expired? Well, we're going to need to tell dot date time equals system dot date time dot now. Okay, so I'm going to store that because we may need to make multiple references to it down here in a bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check the timer. We can do that right now since I did create the timers list. Remember, it's a mapping of date times to integers. So here's our while loop here. And what's this going to be? First of all, I want to keep running. I want to make sure we stop if the timer list ever empties. And that's more important really than checking the time. So while it's greater than 0 is the first condition. And I'm going to put this around in parentheses. I hate using precedents to implied things. And we'll keep running the loop as well as now is greater than timer. So I want to know that what is the time of the very first entry in the sorted list. And that should be in keys, and that'll be in sub-0. And so there's a loop there. So we will keep running this loop as long as there's the head of the list has a time that's in the past. And one of the things we're going to want to do inside this loop is to remove that entry at 0. No, we want to do a bunch of other stuff in here too. Come back to that. This will be the timer processing. Just to run some code just briefly here, I want to create a static int countdown equals 20. Probably should make it 20 here. And then I'll say something like if countdown minus minus is greater than 0, I don't want to hit every one of them because if something goes wrong and this thing starts running away, it'll just be spamming tick over here. So now we're guaranteed to get no more than 20 of these things before we stop. All right, so if we go back into, and here I'll turn off that maximize, and we'll look in the console, and hopefully here's our ticks coming in. Great. So those timer ticks will occur once the zone starts up. They'll keep coming in as long as the zone is running. Okay, so I just wanted to demonstrate the basic functionality of the timer. Make sure that part was working. It's really important that we test every little bit as we go along here to avoid putting in a whole bunch of changes and then seeing things don't work. And we have to figure out what's broken. And it occurs to me that we could probably test this a little bit now if we just added a little bit more functionality to timer tech. Okay, so let's work on this just a little bit. What do we know? We know that timers .0 here is has expired, so I want to get the group ID out of this thing, and that's going to be same thing as timers.values, so 0, and then I'll say debug.log respawn one moth in spawn group. That's group ID. Okay. So I'm going to need to fix up a few things here in a second, but this is good enough for us to see that a timer expires, that it actually will command the right respawn. So let's go add a few in here. A good place to do this, I'm going to add in a few timer entries, fake timer entries in the constructor or NPC manager. We just have to remember to take them back out, otherwise weird things are going to happen. So the way we add entry in here will be timers.add, and then we have to give it some time. Well, I'm going to want to base it off of the current time. So system.datetime.now is the current time, but I want it to be in the future a little bit. So I'm going to add seconds. You see, there's all those different adds in there, so for different rates. I might put in a 20-second one. I'll call that spawn group 1. Date time. Oh yeah. Now. Add seconds, and I'll make that 25 seconds. So we see it. Future and timers.add system.datetime.now.add seconds, and I'll put that 10. So they're coming in with the lowest one last, just to verify that the sorting is occurring. Okay, that we're getting in the right sort order, and that should be enough to get our behavior up here. Even though we're not really doing anything for respawning. And put that in here. So let's let me go see if I can find what happens. Oh, I see what was going on. It actually worked right there. We see the one came in at 10 seconds. So let me restart this and run it. I was kind of startled because my timer tick message just went away, and I just took those out. So here we go. We should count down to about 10 seconds. We should see our first one go. Here's our first respawn. So group 3, remember, was the last one I added at 10 seconds. So it is in the first one on the list. Here's spawn group 1, 5 seconds later, spawn group 2. Okay, so that's the timer behaviors. Virtual timers are working. And so let's go back into MonoDevelop and add some more. Well, let's get rid of these things first before I forget. That will really cause weird things to happen. All right, now what to do? Let's add in the respawn behavior. And I'm going to make some changes to the respawning, because if we come back down here, we see it. We have one respawn method that respawns all the spawn groups. Right, I'm going to rename this respawn all. And I'll have to come back up here where the zone starts. And I'll need to make a corresponding change in the command interpreter. So let me find the respawn command. There it is, on respawn. So all I did was just change the name of that method because I'm going to use a respawn for one mob. And it's really not the NPC manager I'm concerned about, but I am going to have to make the same change to the spawn group. And this is the one that really is doing weird things, because respawn here will respawn the entire spawn group. I'm going to turn it into respawn all. Hop back over to the NPC manager and find out where respawn all is here. See, okay, I want that to respawn all. Back to the spawn group, because I'm going to want to create a spawn group, a single mob respawn. And that's just going to be really a call to spawn random. So why make another entry point there? Because respawn random is private, and I don't want to export the name. So that will give us one mob respawn when it's called from the NPC manager. The first thing that I want to do is to come down here to timer tick and go look up the spawn group from the spawn group ID. Now we do this a number of places, but there's, I was tempted to make some sort of a helper function for this, but there's really no way around all this. We're going to have to get the spawn group, and we have to check the spawn group against null. So it's the same amount of code, however we do it. So the group, and then we'll call spawn groups dot try get value group ID. And that should be group ID and out group. And if group here I'm going to say if it's not equal to null, what we're going to do. Now I want to call the routine that respawns a single mob. So this is where I'm going to have group.respawn. So if we find the spawn group corresponding to that timer entry, we respawn that group, which will cause one mob to respawn, and then we remove the timer entry. So that is fully functional timer respawn behavior here. I think it might be okay. I don't think we might be done. Well, there is one other change I have to make. There's another bug here that we need to take care of, and that is right in here. This is a nasty one. I have the wrong group ID in the second spawn group, and I don't have any spawn respawn times. So in the spawn group constructor, create respawn time. I'll create a private and I will load this in. This dot respawn time equals respawn time. There. Oh, I should also give it an accessor. We're going to allow a getter for respawn time, no setter. Back over to NPC Manager. The only changes we need to make here then, other than that spawn group ID, is to say respawn time, I said 10 seconds for this one, and respawn time 20 seconds for this one. Save that off. Now let's go back to here where the code is doing the respawn. I guess that was being handled in the zone manager maybe. Let's find that. No, I'm not looking for the respawn, I'm looking for the despawn. That's what I want. So I want to start the respawn timers whenever these mobs respawn, or the single mob respawns enough. Okay. timers.add .datetime.now.add seconds. And here I'll just say group.respawn. Respawn time. My group is not supporting that. Did I save this out? Oh, what just happened here? Hopefully I didn't damage anything here. What I was wanting to do is to find out why my, because it's made private. Let's go ahead and make this public. It only has a getter. Not going to hurt anything. Now we come back down to this, make sure I've got all that code in there. Now the respawn for the single mob, or the despawn rather, group.respawn time. Okay, so we set up a timer for just one particular group, and I want the group ID. That's who we're going to respawn. Okay, I think that might be it. So let's go ahead and run this and see if we get the right behavior. Okay, so we're here at Ort 1. I'll kill off this mob. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Okay, so we saw that behavior there. That's good. And I'm not going to bother testing the rest of it because if one of them works, they all work. So that was what I wanted to accomplish in this video, was to complete the whole respawn process. Now we have mobs respawning in the scene. So we can end this video now.